Anyways, I when I watch like the Monday Night Wars documentaries on the network, and I've read like a couple of I have some criticisms of them, and I've read some of yours, and they're fair. But the winner writes history. So, but when I was watching it, Eric, I noticed like, and I don't want to make a big deal out of this, but it's just it kind of, and it's not a big deal, but my version of how the whole like us, Scott and Kev and I jumping to WCW is different than the version that's on the network. Yeah. Not to go like, anyways, I'll just get right to it. On the network, they talk about DDP calling up Scott or Kevin and making the overture that way. I seem to remember being out here in L.A. recuperating from an injury and meeting with Barry Bloom about something other than wrestling, just movie stuff. And he brought up the fact that, the checkbook was getting opened up in WCW and some big money was being thrown around. And the first thing I thought it was get Scott on the phone. He wasn't happy. And that's my version of how it all started. Is that wrong?
No, you know what? Honestly, I've gotten to the point now, 20 or 25 years later, that I don't really think there is any more right or wrong. And I don't think, honestly, and I'm just going to speak for myself. I remember things a certain way. Right. And I'm a human being, and I have flaws, and I have an ego. I have pride. I have a self-image. And I also have a 25-year-old memory. And sometimes, people, I think it's a human trait to remember things the way you choose to remember them. And I think we're all guilty of that. Right. And I will, and with that said, that caveat, established, my recollection of it was really more probably aligned with Page's because he lived right, down the street from me. And he, whether I liked it or not, we talked all the time. Usually he talked all the time and I listened. But Paige, you know what I mean?
Yeah, of course.
Imagine that.
But, Paige knew where we were going, and Paige maintained relationships with people. I never did. Right. I still don't to this day. I'm not a phone friend. I talk to my own brother and sister maybe twice a year, and I love them dearly. It's
Sounds just like me, Eric.
But Paige maintained contact, and from what I remember, when things started changing, because Paige knew where I was thinking, Paige said, and I don't know whether he reached out to you, whether he reached out to them, who he reached out to, but somehow, the way I recall it is, Paige really reached out to Scott first. Maybe that happened simultaneously with you. Maybe you and Scott have a conversation. I don't know. But from my perspective, that's kind of what I remembered.
Okay. Fair enough.
Well, we got that all cleared up.
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, I just wanted to get that because I didn't know if they had the story that way on the network just because nobody's a fan of Barry Bloom these days, or what the deal was with it. Well, I know you're not. We talked about that on the first time I came on your show, which getting ready to. For all those that didn't hear us earlier on, when we're done with this, I'm going to roll right over into yours. But anyways, Eric, when I was on your show, well, no, I'm not going to go there yet. Sorry. When I first signed with you guys, it was after Scott and Kev. I was supposed to be the first. Do you remember? Of the three of us. Originally, at least in our group, the way we were talking, I was going to be the first one to jump. And what happened was, I went to give my 90-day notice, and my contract had already rolled over, so I was screwed. And so Kevin Scott could go, but I couldn't. And then, to shorten the story up, we had this 3-week tour of Europe before those guys came to work for you, Eric. And when we got back from that, I had to go into rehab. and that was my first rehab trip. And I came out of that, and basically Vince said, if you want to go to work for that billionaire asshole and be with your friends, that's exact words he used. Exact words. As a matter of fact, I have it on tape, believe it or not.
So clearly he wasn't referring to me.
No, well, it was still about Ted. Yeah.
It was all about Ted.
But basically he said, I'll give you a week to think about it and I'll let you go. So did you feel like you were getting damaged goods, Eric?
Not at all.
No?
Not at all.
I wouldn't blame you.
First of all, I didn't know that backstory, but when the pieces just started to fall into place, and again, I've said this before, I won't spend a lot of time here because people have heard it before, but it's not like I had this master plan all laid out and, step 1, step 2, step 3,
right.
step 4, and this whole NWO thing was like this giant vision in my head. A lot of it was luck and timing. I had a general idea of what I wanted to do, but I didn't have it broken down, like you would a script. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I wish I could say I did because it'd make me sound smarter than I am. And that's typically what people in the wrestling business do. But the truth is the pieces just kind of fell into place. And once you became available, it was just like so natural. And whatever had happened previously really didn't matter to me at all. It was irrelevant to me conceptually.
Well, I guess, you know what? I guess that question makes me think that maybe I felt like damaged goods. And really, I guess I did. Because, Eric, I don't know if you remember this, but when I first came in, I couldn't even spit a sentence. I was telling these guys, I couldn't even spit a sentence out when it came time to do a promo at first when I got there. And I was thinking to myself, oh my God, Eric must think what did he just pay for? So, and eventually, I got more confident, and got my sea legs.
But you know what, Sean, if I may, and I don't mean to interrupt you on your show because that's rude, and I don't mean
please
to be
do.
rude.
This is a conversation. This isn't, line of questioning.
But I think, and I've said this to you, I've mentioned this to you in a different context previously, but what I saw in you, look, I had Scott Hall who could talk his ass off for as long as we could find power to the building to keep the audio going. He could talk. Then I got Kevin Nash. Same thing.
Yeah.
All right. Maybe not quite as great of a talker as Scott, in my opinion. They were different.
Yeah.
Hard to say one was better than the other. But if I had to put a value on one or the other, I'd give Scott a 10 plus and I'd give Kevin a 10.
Sure.
And then there was Hulk Hogan in the mix, and he could talk. So I didn't need a talker. I didn't need somebody else that was going to fight for mic time.
Sure.
What I needed was a vibe. What I needed was a look. What I needed was an energy that when people saw it, it just had that edge and that rawness, no pun intended. Mm-hmm. It had that relevant cultural vibe to it that you brought to the table. And quite honestly, if you were mute, it wouldn't have mattered because you just brought that vibe to it. And I think you underestimate yourself. And I think people that look at the success of the NWO, because it's real easy to go, oh, it was Scott Hall, it was Kevin Nash, it was Hulk Hogan, it was this, blah, 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 blah. It was a sum of all the parts. And you were just as integral of that part of that total, or of that, the sum of that total as anybody was.
I get what you're saying. I just know how. I think I'm pretty fair with when I look back at things involving my career and how I was. I think I'm pretty fair, and I have a pretty good, objective, about as objective as you can be when it comes to yourself. And I just think, it wasn't my strong suit, the promos, in the ring, man. And that's where my confidence was. And so I appreciate you saying that. But
it's true, and it's like a good movie. A great movie isn't about one character's or one actor's ability.
Right.
It's about the cast, and it's about the chemistry. Hulk Hogan wasn't really good at flying around the ring doing a bunch of crazy stuff that made people go, "Whoa! Did you see that?" You were.
Yeah.
Each one of you had your own role, and I've said that before. The NWO was and is, and we'll talk about this
later,
one of the most successful, I think, ideas in wrestling, not because it was the greatest idea in the world, but because it was one of the greatest casts in the world.
Yeah, it was. And, just amazing cast. We'll get in, speaking of cast, later when we'll talk about the NWO later, and I want to bring that up about the cast and how big it got. But but Eric, when I was on your show, you brought up you asked me about drugs and drug use, and I kind of I don't know. I didn't understand maybe the question at first when I was trying to answer it, but because I thought you were just talking about pills and all that. But we were discussing. I think you were really what you were getting at was PEDs. It seemed like, and it made me start thinking. Like after we had the conversation, Eric, I know you guys had drug testing, and you had a drug policy in place, but man, we honestly didn't feel like you guys really had one there. I don't remember ever getting tested. Well, I know I didn't get tested. Matter of fact, when I did show up to the Georgia Mountain Center one time and there was white lab coats there, I got in the car and turned around and left. Because I'm just being honest, and I know you can't fire me now, but